Good Sunday morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. It's a special one-hour-long edition with two candidates who would like your vote to be the next mayor of Knox County. This is a county of more than 500,000 people and a budget of more than $1 billion. It's a big job, and one person who would like that job is with us this morning. Betsy Henderson, the Republican winner in the primary. Nice to have you with us again.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Absolutely.
Good to be back.
Well, it's great to have you. We'll talk about your qualifications, why you're running, what you want to do. John North, my colleague, is with us here at Channel 10. Good to have you alongside.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, John.
All right, Ms. Henderson, let's talk about your big win in the primary. You won handily against your opponents. Explain what you think resonated with voters in the primary that you plan to carry through to the general election.
Absolutely. So, I'm still very grateful and humbled that we won the primary decisively. We won with almost a 14-point margin, a 6,000 vote lead, and being outspent 6-1. And so I'm very proud of the work that we put in. I'm very proud of our team that we've put together. We knocked on over 25,000 doors in the primary. And so just meeting folks at the door, having those conversations, and really listening to the concerns and issues. And, a lot of people, what's going well and the positive things that are going on in the county. And so, we heard a lot at the doors, and I think it was the grassroots efforts. I think I'm now on my third pair of tennis shoes, because we have continued the same efforts. After the night after the primary, many people asked, well, are you going to take some time off? Are you going to get a chance to breathe? My kids took the day off from school the next day because they were out so late, but we hit the ground running that next day, knocking on doors. My husband and daughter are out right now putting signs back out, and so we're working just as hard for the general.
You have two teenagers. You're serving on school board right now. I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the big developments in the last couple of weeks, and that was the decision by County Commission to essentially raid the school district budget for about $7 million in order to pay for raises for employees in Knox County.
Yes.
You're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. We'll talk about that, but first, is that something you would support, that move by Commission?
I'm glad that you're bringing this up so we can have a conversation about this. So County Commission did vote in their budget meeting to decrease the school budget by $4 million of local funds, and then there's $3 million of the state funds, so a total of $7 million. That is that shortfall that we will now have to go back and figure out our spending, figure out our budget, and then vote on that again. The way that County Commission went about that, I do not support. I think that we have to pay our employees, especially our sheriff's officers. But, we did this at the school level several years ago. We made historic investments in our teachers, in that we did a very well thought out, well-intentioned salary study. So in that, some employees we found were not at market value. Some, their salaries increased by 12%. Some were at market value. Some increased by 2%. So the fact that that was not done and that process was not there, I don't support what County Commission did.
Have you had a chance to talk to any commissioners about that, to say maybe, hey, what the heck?
A few of them, but not many, because I've been out at so many doors, and then also trying to dive into the school budget with Dr. Reiswick, and what does that look like going forward?
And what does it look like? Because we've heard rumblings that it may be upwards of 30 employees. We may see furloughs. What are your understandings of the consequences?
Yeah, so those things are maybe some options. They are going to present that Monday night at our work session, and then we'll be voting on that. So those options will be presented Monday evening to the board as a whole.
This is a good moment to sort of transition. I was thinking about you when that was happening, because I was like,
oh no.
If you're Betsy Henderson or Beau Hawk, you're like, wait a minute, this is my budget. What are you doing to my budget? Suddenly deciding to, maybe it's too strong a word, hijack the budget. If you're the mayor, what are you thinking? You and staff have spent all this time prepping a spending plan that calls for like 3% raises for employees, which is not bad. And then
we do need to take care of our employees. No, absolutely.
They go rob Peter to pay Paul, as they say.
It's the process that I have an issue with. It is still Mayor Jacobs' budget, and so I do like that we will be under Mayor Jacobs' budget for the next year, and kind of get acclimated to that. And what do we want want to see in the next budget when it truly does become our budget. But I will say the school system and district leaders were blindsided by this as well. We had no idea that this was coming down the pipelines. So it was a real shock to us.
So let me ask you, you are running, you had an effective message for the primary, very effective. Some of us who are kind of old hands thought, well, sure, say not going to raise taxes, but it proved effective. But I wanted to ask you, so now it's you and Mr. Hawk. We haven't had a tax increase under Burchett or Jacobs.
Correct.
And it's been a long time since we've actually
Yes.
had a tax increase. So we're already sort of used to that lifestyle.
Let's continue it.
Well, what's going to be different about the way you run the county if you're elected than, say, the leadership that we've had under Republicans for the last, I don't know, 16 years or so?
I will say that we have been very blessed to be under Republican leadership for as long as we have. You know, we are a red county, but I don't take that for granted. But we are very blessed to have been under Glenn and Tim's leadership. And, you know, we haven't had a tax increase since 1999.
Long time.
Long time. And that is because of responsible spending and natural growth. And because of that, we have been blessed to not have a tax increase. And, you know, other people, too, around the country are finding out about how great it is to live here in Knox County because we do have a low tax rate. And, you know, that absolutely can continue. You know, it was a message and it resonated, but it's also something that I truly believe in. You know, Mayor Jacobs has done a fabulous job handling the budget, making sure that we do have a lean budget. You know, I worked for Congressman Duncan, who was probably the most fiscal conservative member of Congress. So this really does mean something for me. It is a choice between, you know, I talk to families at the door, and a lot of times they're choosing between prescriptions or groceries. And several people said, if we have a property tax increase and my property taxes are higher, I may lose my home. And so this really does affect families here in Knox County. So I absolutely want to continue that. We do not need a property tax increase. The budget, it is doable, and we can manage very well. And so I look forward to continuing that leadership.
You have mentioned good schools, good roads, safe neighborhoods. Those are your three priorities.
Yes.
Let's expand that conversation to growth and infrastructure, because that's something we talked a lot about in the campaign. We know from county leaders that they're spending roughly $7 million a year on roads. Just to keep pace, they should be spending about $14 million a year, so not even half of that. If we are to expand our infrastructure in terms of paving, where do you find the money?
Where do you find the money? So this is something that has come up. You know, when we were knocking on those 25,000 doors in the primary, the two biggest issues that came up were, you know, not having a tax increase and the growth and development that we're seeing here in Knox County. And a big part of that is infrastructure, or our roads. You know, John, like we were talking about earlier, I'm the mom of 2 teenage children, and so I've got 2 new drivers, and so they're driving on these roads. We're seeing a lot of development, a lot of houses popping up, but our infrastructure cannot keep up with the pace. So it really is about just prioritizing, making sure that we're focusing on core services like our roads, our schools, safe neighborhoods, and then just getting government out of the way. You know, I said during the primary that I'm going to put together a STAR commission. We're going to dive into the budget, already starting to dive into the budget and seeing where can we be efficient, effective. You know, Mayor Jacobs has already done a great job. The money is there, so I'm very confident that we can just be efficient and effective and just prioritize those core services.
So if I understand you correctly, you think that you will be able to find $14 million to fund, to expand the road work that we're seeing in the county?
I do. And, you know, another piece of the roads is having that relationship with our state delegation. You know, I'll give North Shore, for example. That road is county, city, and state. And so a lot of our roads are state roads as well. So it's working with the state, having those relationships, which I have a great relationship with our state delegation, and really fighting for what we deserve here in Knox County.
One other piece, John, and I'll let you in, but I want to talk about growth, because this, as you say, connects it perfectly. And I think Mayor Jacobs, if I understand him correctly, in the Advanced Knox program that he supports, that you didn't support, and we can get into that, he would say development like Belltown is what he'd like to see more of. Do this. Is there a development that you say, do this, not that, in your mind about what makes smart growth?
That is a great question, and I'm glad we're talking about that, because that was one of the biggest issues that we hear, whether it's in the Gibbs community all the way out to Farragut and everywhere in between. It's really about balancing that growth, making sure that we are putting growth on the infrastructure that exists. And, you know, out in Hardin Valley, for example, we're seeing a lot of urban sprawl. So that's what not to do going forward. It is a blessing that people want to move here. It's a blessing that people are coming here and want to put roots here in Knox County. But we have to be in control of what this looks like and not let it control us. And so it's really about just putting it where it makes sense. And two, I think a big piece of this is making sure that we are attracting businesses. You know, like I said, we see a lot of urban sprawl happening in Hardin Valley, but it's attracting businesses as well. I'd like to see more businesses come out to the county. Right now, a lot of our businesses are centered in the city limits, and so the county's not capturing that revenue. So I would really like to attract more businesses to the county as we're growing.
And do you see, is there a Belltown, is that the kind of development you think is smart? You mentioned Hardin Valley, not what you want to see.
Right,
what do you want to see?
Yeah, I think a mix of homes and businesses working together.
Is there a community that's a good example of that?
Oh, you know, North Shore Town Center is a great example, I think, where you do have those businesses and single-family homes.
Okay. We want to hear from your opponent real quickly, Beau Hawk, running against you. Here's what he says about infrastructure. Let's listen, and then we'll have you comment.
I mean, we've been talking about infrastructure more than anything in some cases, I think, but really leaning on public-private partnership, kind of what I was talking about last time I was on, and just working with the business community to try to, you know, invest in our infrastructure and finding different kind of ways to build that out without leaning on tax increases and things like that, because, you know, as I was saying last time I was on here as well, I think that that's just not a realistic option right now based on what I'm hearing from people and my own experience as a renter and a working class person here in town and in the county. It's just...
He's hinting at a public-private partnership to deal with the infrastructure issue. Is that viable? Is that realistic?
You know, it's definitely a unique perspective. I'm all about creative solutions. I, you know, work very closely with our business community, and if we can bring businesses to the table and they can partner with us, I think it's a great idea. You know, that's something I've done at the school level. You know, when I ran for the school board, increasing literacy scores was something that was important to me, and exposing kids to more books. And so in that, I created a literacy program with Mayor Jacobs. We do not spend government money on that. I partner with local businesses so that I fundraise the entire program from private dollars. And so I think definitely creative solutions so that we are we're mindful of how we are spending taxpayer funds and going to businesses and partnering with them more is a good idea.
We're going to have more from Betsy Henderson, more of Inside Tennessee. Again, this is a special 1-hour edition. Back with that right after this.
Being a libertarian means that I don't spend every waking moment worried that someone somewhere is doing something I don't agree with. Do what you want, just don't hurt other people and don't force your views on them. Otherwise, mind your own business. We'd all be happier. Seems like pretty good advice no matter what your position is.
It's called freedom, John.
There we go.
Yep.
Glenn Jacobs, we appreciate it.
So that was Glenn Jacobs to you, John North. You were reading a tweet of his and a bit of advice to whomever wins this mayor's race.
Right. It's been interesting covering Mayor Jacobs because he is a libertarian, as you know. I wanted to ask him at that show, libertarian or Republican, what means the most to you? He might have said libertarian, but I did want to ask you kind of as a transition, Betsy. Obviously, you are a Republican, lifelong Republican, come from a Republican family, work for a Republican congressman. We've been in Republican County, heavily red for a long time. How do you get along with everybody? Because we have 500,000 people, and not everybody is Republican, much as the party might wish it that way. How do you get along with everybody or try to work with people, adjust your thinking if need be, or adjust their thinking if need be?
Yeah, you know, I am a proud Republican,
Yes.
lifelong Republican, and but you do have to work with people that have different views, and so, you know, I do that all the time on the school board. You know, we have a 5-4 majority on the school board, and we get a lot of things done. I'm really proud of the work that we've accomplished. And, you know, day to day, it's about, you know, getting that day-to-day work done, coming to the table, having a civil discussion, being respectful with one another. I'll always stand to my principles and values, but always have a respectful conversation.
Is there ever a chance where you could change your mind, or have you, while you've been on school board, and said, you know what, you're right?
Yeah, you know, I think one example of that would be, you know, during COVID, we decided to go one-on-one with devices for students, and that made sense during COVID. And now that has come back up at the school board, and you know, we're having those discussions. Does this make sense now? And so I, you know, voted for the resolution that we need to get back to pen and paper, and we don't need to be so heavily dependent on those devices. So that is one example of, hey, you know what, made sense during this time, needed to be done, but we need to change our minds and listen to the community, listen to the experts, and move forward in a different direction.
Ahead of the primary, we asked viewers, folks on WBIR.com, to sort of submit questions for all of you candidates for the primary.
Which I appreciate listening, you know, hearing from the community.
Yeah, we enjoyed that.
Yes.
And we did the same thing for this, so
Great.
we're going to ask you some questions.
Wonderful.
We'll also ask Beau Hawk the same questions, kinds of questions. I want to tell you that in Block 1 we talked about growth.
Yes.
Nobody likes growth out there. Nobody likes growth. So I'm not going to ask you this question, but if you're elected, remember, nobody likes growth. So I do want to ask you this question, though, coming from viewers. What's the first big county topic you want to tackle if you're elected?
That is
kind of like September 1, the month of September. Is there something chunky you want to take on?
Yes, you know, I truly believe on day one that you have to be ready to govern. I will be ready to govern on day one. So I've spent the summer diving into policies, diving into issues, what is important to our county, and my #1 goal is diving into that budget, forming that commission of local business.
Something called the Star Commission,
The Star Commission, yes. And so it's going to be made up of local business owners, local business leaders, and we're going to dive into that budget and make sure how can we be efficient, how can we be effective. As I said, Mayor Jacobs has done a fabulous job. But, you know, there's lots of companies that are bought and sold every day, and even then, you know, you dive in, what can be done differently, where can we find those savings, and that's something I'm looking forward to diving in from day one.
You'll crank that up. Do you already sort of know what that's going to look like in terms of who might be on it if you were elected?
You know, I've got some folks in mind, and so I'm excited to have those conversations with them, and some folks have reached out to me that want to come on board, and so I'm excited to dig into that work with them.
Another question, how will you separate your personal or religious beliefs, whether conservative, evangelical, or liberal, from your job representing the 500,000 people who live in Knox County? So, like, whatever you bring to the table personally, how do you separate that from the big job ahead, you know, leading the #3 county in the state?
Oh, wow. What a question. Well, you know, I have, first and foremost, I am a daughter of our Savior and Lord Jesus Christ, and I'm a Christian, and I'm proud to be a Christian. And that is a part of my everyday. I am a Christian, I'm a wife, I'm a mom. That sets my moral compass and my value system and my principles. So it will be a part of my decision making.
Another question we had from a viewer is, are you committed to a planned growth vision as contemplated in the Unified Development Ordinance started under the Jacobs administration? This falls under the Advanced Knox Plan, which you voted against, but explain where you stand on this UDO that is still in process.
Right. So, you know, we had Advanced Knox, which was, you know, the 30,000-foot view of what is this growth going to look like.
Now we're getting specific.
Right, exactly. So the UDO is kind of the meat and potatoes, I like to say, of that plan. And, you know, I was against Advanced Knox because of two reasons. Because it puts 9,000 acres of our rural land now into that growth development plan. And, you know, intentional community input is important to me. You know, the UDO, they're currently having those public input meetings. I don't think that county commission, this current county commission, will not set that plan. I think it will bleed over into the new administration, the new county commission. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. You know, one thing that's very important to me is making sure that going forward that we have intentional community input. I went to several of those meetings, and, you know, it was checking a box. Minds were already made up. I tried to ask questions. They were like, oh no, here's your sticky dots. Just go put them on these posters of ideas. And so moving forward, I'm excited to see what is brought, but making sure that we take that plan back to the community and it has community buy-in.
Another question for both candidates is, neither of you have executive management experience in terms of like leading a company or what have you. So how are we going to know that you will do this job well? What skills have you got? Because it seems like you might have to learn a lot.
Yeah, you know, I love learning. I think it's one about bringing folks to your team, bringing the right people and building an amazing team. And then two, you know, it's about what board have you served on and who has made the greatest impact. You know, I've been on the school board for the past 6 years. I've been chair for 2 of those years. I'm proud of the work that I've accomplished under my leadership along with Dr. Reiswick. And so it's really about who has made the greatest impact.
One other question, what can you do to bring down the cost of housing in Knox County? And some people would say you got to build a lot more housing to make that happen. But it sounds like no one wants that.
No, seriously. Our viewers are like, no, close the borders.
I will say it is a balancing act. It is a balancing act because we're growing, but how do we grow in a smart, balanced way that really protects the character and identity of what we love about Knox County? You know, a piece of making sure that people can have the American dream here in Knox County is making sure that that next generation has job opportunities, high-paying, high-quality jobs, and the folks that are already here have that as well. So I'm looking forward to working with our business community to see what do you need in a workforce, whether that's students graduating or folks that are already here. How can we give them those opportunities to make sure that they're empowered to have these high-paying, high-quality jobs?
And about housing costs, do you think that comes from what?
You know, a lot of it is mortgage rates and the market sets what it said. So a lot of that is out of government's hands. But what can government do to make people's lives better? And I think it's making sure that they are set up for success in the job market.
You know, Mayor Jacobs really invested strategically in workforce development for people who aren't necessarily going on to a university degree.
He did a fabulous job with that.
Is that something you'd like to continue?
Absolutely. I think we could have a whole other segment just on this. You know, my parents worked really hard. My dad came here from Greece when he was 16, and together he and my mom opened restaurants together. So I'm very proud of the background that I came from, and I want the American dream for the next generation. And, you know, college is a pathway for many students. But there's other pathways, whether that's going right into the workplace, whether that is enlisting in the military. And so there's a pathway for every child and every student. It's making sure that they have those opportunities. And, you know, I served on the 865 Academy Task Force. And I'm so proud of this initiative. It's now in all 16 of our high schools.
Doing well.
Doing well, and that is something that I want to grow, I want to strengthen, and I want to expand on. You know, it intentionally partners businesses with our high schools. So businesses, you know, now see what is going on in the high schools. Those businesses can tell us, hey, this is what we need from our workforce. And so it really exposes kids to careers. It exposes students to different pathways where they may not have known that these companies or opportunities existed before. So that's something I'm really looking forward to expanding.
There was one question which I think we asked you all because it's been a persistent issue in Knox County for a while. In the spring, and I'll ask it to you again because it's on the minds of people. It's sort of related to the housing question, and that is, what do we do, what can you do to help the people who are homeless standing at the intersections or off the interstates or in our county parks or on our trails to get them housing or get them to where they're not in neighborhoods where people would rather they not be. How do you do that?
Yeah, this is a huge issue. We talked about it the last time that I was on the show, but I'm having conversations at the doors. I'm having the same conversation with our business community, our faith-based leaders also.
And they do a lot.
They do a lot, and it's an issue that we've seen in the city, but it's also an issue that is heavily bleeding into the county as well. One big piece of it is mental health. There's no easy answer to this. There is no magic silver bullet to fixing this, but mental health is a huge piece of this, and then also working with the sheriff to make sure that law enforcement piece is there. If you're breaking the law, you need to be held accountable. But then also making sure that we're working with the state in order to get a mental health facility that is desperately needed here.
Betsy Henderson, you've been kind with your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Best of luck in the general election.
I appreciate it.
Thanks to our viewers for asking some of the questions as well posed to this candidate and the one you'll see next coming up in just a few minutes here on Inside Tennessee. If you're watching us online, you can find that other conversation as well at WBIR.com. Beau Hawk coming up. Betsy Henderson is the Republican nominee and would like your vote on August 6th. We'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Back on this Sunday morning with a special edition of Inside Tennessee, talking with another candidate, a Democrat who would like to be the next mayor of Knox County. Beau Hawk with us in studio. We're glad to have you. Wanted to have the candidates together. Schedules just didn't work out, but Beau Hawk, nice to have you with us.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. My colleague John North right alongside us, and we're going to jump right into it. Beau, you got into this race for several reasons. Explain your top three.
Top three, I definitely was looking at the situation in the county as far as how much of a challenge it's become to deal with the cost of living. Everything's going up and so much growth is happening, but I see so much of the burden of that growth being placed on working people, and they're the people that go to work every day and make it possible for this county to be as good as it is for people to live here. So that's the main thing, is wanting to see that addressed. I mean, as gas prices go up and inflation goes up, and the cost of living skyrockets and wages remain largely stagnant for workers, I really want to see somebody with a vision in government locally that actually is trying to work to address those issues. A big part of it for me is just wanting to see more everyday people have a voice in their government, and there's just not a lot of participation right now. We talk a lot about low voter turnout and just people are not engaged, and it's where the most important things happen, is at the local level. So getting people, building more trust in local government, getting people more involved, and kind of having more processes of accountability and transparency, even if it's situations where I think we already have like a good amount of accountability, making it more accessible, making it, getting the word out about whenever we have an audit, things like that, making it presented in language where people can understand it, and just kind of building more of that trust that way. And really just seeing, I mentioned the growth a minute ago that ties into the other two things, but there's an opportunity to make this the best place in the entire country to live. I think it's already one of the better places, but we're really positioned well. I do a lot of things with workforce development regionally, and I think that having a more regional perspective, taking advantage of all of the partnerships that we could have and the existing major institutions like TVA that we have in our backyard, really leveraging all that to kind of really aggressively push forward for a more prosperous future. I think that's a big part of it for me, is just taking the reins of all that growth and making it more responsible to the community community, because I hear a lot of concerns about development from folks when I'm out talking to voters, and I just want to see that addressed.
We want to dive into those specifics. I want to get this political question out of the way, though, because we did see recently stories circulating about your participation in a parade in support of Nicolas Maduro. This is, of course, the dictator who was removed by the Trump administration in the Special Forces raid some months ago. Explain your involvement and what you think of that story.
I think that story is sourced from, I know that story is sourced from a very ideologically biased foreign news agency. So I think that the framing of it by my opposition has been really a deliberate attempt to manufacture a controversy because they don't want to talk about the issues. The statements that I've previously given to the media, I think they about cover it, and I don't really want to give it more oxygen than it deserves because it's not relevant to the actual issues that are being faced by working people in this county. It has nothing to do with Knox County and the framing of it. It's just like the version of it that is out there is not at all what's true about, and I've owned up to the mistakes of, how the optics of certain things, but I'm not, the record that they're putting out there is not accurate.
Was it a mistake to go?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Just to follow up, and I'm not trying to sort of push further, but any other things you've done like that are going to surface or that people will try and use against you?
No, I don't think so. I was aware of that one from the beginning, and I've been really transparent with folks that, I talk to.
Well, let's dive into growth, because that's an issue that both you and your opponent have focused on a lot in this campaign. And I asked her this or that question. For instance, Knox County Mayor Glenn Jacobs says, we need more bell towns in this community. That's kind of the future. What we should see is more density and more diversity in the housing that we build in Knox County. What's your take on that? And is there a place in this community where you say, this is the way it should look like, not this way?
Yeah, I think that example, I think doing more things that involve using the existing kind of things that we have, like zoning when it comes to a town center, things like that. Having, density in the right places where there's infrastructure in place to support it is the biggest thing to me. I think that's key. I think working with the business community and taking advantage of opportunities to do partnership and to do more incentives for the kind of development that we want to see so that, the business community benefits from it as well, but investing in the infrastructure in the area, but really kind of making sure that we are preventing more reckless sprawl out into the rural parts of the county where there's not infrastructure to support it, and we've already got that $5 billion deficit in infrastructure maintenance and repair. So if we're going to start addressing those things, we got to kind of stop just the really loosey-goosey kind of development that we're seeing. But you can't stop it. You can't, but you can try to guide it in a certain way.
And just quickly, a follow-up. Your opponent said she didn't like what's happening in the Hardin Valley community. That to her feels like sprawl with the housing that's gone in. She focused on North Shore Town Center and being a better model. Is that something you agree with, or do you see it a little differently than that?
No, I think that there's definitely common ground there. Anywhere that we can, people, I hear, even not always people agreeing with me what I would necessarily want to see where I want to live, but I understand that there's particular areas where people are very open about, we want the community to be this level of density. So, I think it depends on the area. I think it depends on listening to the community that's there. But I do think that things like that are, a good way to go in certain cases.
There's a component of Knox County Commission right now that is pretty determined to sort of discourage or try to control growth or development as much as possible. We also hear from viewers that they're like, we don't need any more.
Right.
We don't need more people. Let's stop what we've got. I'm curious about what you think about all of that.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a realistic way of
You wouldn't stand at the county line and say, sorry, you can't pass?
Yeah, you can't put up the drawbridge. And I think really if you're going to take a extremely hard stance on I'm pledging no property tax increase ever, but if you're also opposed at the same time to any kind of growth, that's the only thing that's been keeping us economically afloat for the past few decades in the absence of an increase. So I've been open that I don't want to see more tax burden on working people in the county, but that's part of why I think it's good to encourage investment, encourage growth, and encourage more jobs being created. I think growth is a good thing, but the way that it's happening right now is the issue.
Democrats are sometimes criticized, rightly or wrongly, as being softer on supporting law enforcement, not being so eager to do that, whereas Republicans might be more so. If you're elected county mayor, one of the big areas you're going to deal with is the sheriff's office and them asking for money and them asking for raises, money for cars, things like that. I'd love to know your attitude about law enforcement and your support for law enforcement and also for the Knox County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big supporter of, I want to make sure that our law enforcement officers are paid in a competitive way with neighboring law enforcement agencies, and I think that we really need to take better care of the employees in the sheriff's office. I think that it's in particular when it comes to not just compensation but pensions. I think that we need to protect the sheriff's deputies' pensions, and I think that day one I would want to have an audit of any pension modifications that have been made, because I don't think that they've been in line with what is actually in the county charter, and that's one thing that the county mayor can actually directly enforce. So I think that doing that and building a relationship with the sheriff, I think myself and Brent Gibson share the same kind of vision when it comes to taking better care of our sheriff's deputies, so I would look forward to working with them on that.
It is not unusual for the sheriff to come to the mayor and say, I want a 10% increase salary-wise for my people. How do you deal with that?
I think, a lot of my work is focused on coalition building and trying to find common ground with people, and you're never going to have complete alignment, but the point is to find, somewhere in the middle where both parties can be fairly happy with the outcome, and I think that's what I would pursue in that kind of situation. I think especially when we're talking about budgets, there's going to be a lot of different competing views of where to put all the money and how much, and I think that I would just do what I've been doing in my career, just continue to bring people to the table and have open discussion and dialogue and make sure that we're treating each other with respect and understanding that we have the same ultimate goals in mind, and that's making sure that the county government actually operates in a way that benefits the people of Knox County.
One of the newest twists in the budget debate in Knox County came as a surprise to a lot of leaders when Knox County Commission made the decision to dip into the school budget and take about $4 million and use that money for raises for county employees. We heard from your opponent on that. I want to listen to Betsy Henderson, her reaction to what happened. She's also a member of the school board. Here's what she had to say, and then we'll listen to Beau Hawk.
The County Commission did vote in their budget meeting to decrease the school budget by $4 million of local funds, and then there's $3 million of the state funds, so a total of $7 million. That is that shortfall that we will now have to go back and figure out our spending, figure out our budget, and then vote on that again. The way that County Commission went about that, I do not support. I think that
So she does not support the way that happened. What say you?
I'm curious what it means to say that, there's an issue with how it happened, because, I think whether you agree with the outcome or not, it was the working of the commission in action. I think that's, up to them to do those kind of things, and that's why it's important to build a relationship with them as county mayor and work with them to try to, have some kind of a shared agenda. But, I think that it's interesting the timing of the increase and just how atypical it is compared to, the usual increase. So obviously I'm definitely in favor of paying our county employees better across the board. That's part of my platform. But I don't know that, cutting it from the school budget is the best idea.
We had heard that what Commission did may have been a reaction or anticipation to the fact that a new administration was going to come on board, whether it's you or Betsy. What do you think about that?
I mean, it sounds compelling to me. I mean, I think that I have heard people concerned about, line items that are really conspicuously the most easy to slash by any candidate that wanted to implement a Doge-style committee that was cutting the budget, and I think a lot of county employees would be looking at losing their jobs in that scenario. So I think people are right to be kind of concerned about that, and I could see it being linked to that.
You've told us, Robin Wilhoit, on our podcast a couple times that you're looking at the budget, you've been familiarizing yourself. Do you see a lot of flab or play in the budget, or do you think it's fairly organized and lean?
I think it's lean. I think I've said publicly that I think that Mayor Jacobs has been a fiscally responsible mayor, and the commission that he's been working with. And I think, the way to go about it is to not act as if there's any kind of graft or waste or fraud or anything like that in the budget. I think that there's certain things that you can tweak based on your particular preferences and some of the smaller kind of concerns in the budget, but broadly the biggest chunks of it are things that I don't think you have a lot of wiggle room.
We're going to take a quick break on Inside Tennessee. Back with the second part of our conversation with Beau Hawk, who would like your vote as the next Knox County mayor. Back with more of our conversation right after this.
Being a libertarian means that I don't spend every waking moment worried that someone somewhere is doing something I don't agree with. Do what you want, just don't hurt other people and don't force your views on them. Otherwise, mind your own business. We'd all be happier. Seems like pretty good advice no matter what your position is.
It's called freedom, John.
There we go.
There you go. That's Mayor Jacobs to you last week on Inside Tennessee. It was our last chance to really talk with him before he leaves office. And John, he also offered a little deeper advice to whomever takes his seat.
Right. I'd be curious about your reaction. He basically, of course, he's known very much for being a libertarian, Republican, an R, but also a libertarian, which I think has always been a big deal to him. One of the sort of ways in which he has established his reputation, however, is not to come across as too accusatorial, to be too partisan, although he does have strong views, and also to try and listen. And I'm just curious if you've had a chance to talk to him, or how you mentally would approach the job yourself.
Yeah, we've spoken, and I think that that's good advice, and we are going to be speaking more as I'm speaking with more of the county department heads and folks like that to just continue to learn more about the operations of government. But I think the question was if I would do something similar, or yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely the way I look at things. I think it's really important to not frame things, and I talk a lot about how it's so hyper partisan now, and it's not really something that I'm about. I'm really just working with everybody that I can and making sure that we're all we've got the same goal. And I think there's a lot of good people that are already working for the county that just want to make this place a better place to live and serve the community. So
we're also seeing, as John said, we're seeing right now playing out on commission sort of people taking some sides, and some people being a little bit more contentious and maybe even culture oriented. How are you going to deal with that?
Definitely taking a lot of deep breaths and just being patient, I think, because it's something that really concerns me. I think it's a really disturbing thing to see happen at the national level to begin with, but to see it trickle down to the local level is
it's here.
It's discouraging to see it taking over, because the more that happens, the more of the same old political games are being played, the less the actual issues are going to get solved.
One of the issues you discussed with Robin Wilhoit was infrastructure, and how do you deal with the roads that need to be built? We talked to your opponent about this, but right now Jim Snowden says we're spending roughly $7 million a year in paving. Just to keep up with the paving we need to do, we need about $14 million just to keep us steady. You spoke with Robin about perhaps developing some public-private partnerships that might compensate for that gap. Explain that for our viewers.
Yeah, and I think part of that I might not have mentioned when I was talking to Robin was that I think it's really important to start with a 10-year capital plan that's, again, it's accessible to the public, that has a very easily understood hierarchical kind of breakdown of the state of all of our roads and bridges, and taking into account things like projected economic growth in particular areas, safety, community impact, and community input on what needs the most repair and maintenance and expansion, because I hear about certain intersections, for example, when it comes to safety, where people are really concerned about how dangerous they are. So I think starting from that place, a lot of these issues are going to be really difficult to tackle, but I think getting a thorough understanding from day one and making it accessible to the public so they understand it as well makes it possible for us to then go out and start pursuing some of these kind of more novel ways of resolving the issues by doing those kind of public-private partnerships, convening more of the business community to work with the county government to invest in that infrastructure.
Do you think that developers should be paying more of the infrastructure costs if and when they put in a development of single-family homes or townhomes or apartments?
I think that I wouldn't necessarily frame it as they need to do more. I think that it's give and take. I think that, and that's coming from somebody who's really coming from the community side of things. But to get to where we want to be, I think it really is a matter of incentivizing, and because I hear from particular developers. I'll be talking to the community one night where they're not a fan of this developer, and I'm definitely in alignment with them on making sure that their voices are heard and nothing is railroaded through the planning commission and things like that. But also, some of these developers may also be, investing in that infrastructure already. And I think I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to partner more. I'd like to incentivize more and try to get more consensus with the community. So the most important thing to me is still making sure that it's accountable to the community, but I wouldn't necessarily frame it in those adversarial kind of terms.
One of the issues that's looming over Knox County, something that has kind of been lurking in the shadows for many years, is debt management. It is coming due, and it's not something where you can just shrug it off. It's going to be a challenge for whoever gets into that office to deal with that wave coming towards you, if you will, to get on the surfboard and be able to ride it okay. How are you going to ride it?
Yeah, I think making sure, again, that we are taking a thorough accounting of how certain parts of the county government are operating. I think looking at things like the PBA management contract, it's like $11 million or something like that, without any kind of public benchmarks or milestones that the other departments are being held to account on. And I think that looking at that, and not necessarily, I'm not saying that needs to be cut, but just putting more restrictions in place to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible with some of those funds. I think
you're talking about Public Building Authority, which
yes.
manages a number of buildings,
right.
Including downtown.
I'd just like to see more transparency from that contract. Yeah.
We want to get to some viewer questions because we did ask our viewers about what they'd like to hear from the candidates. We asked your opponent a few of them, and I'm going to begin with one that I asked her. Are you committed to a planned growth vision as contemplated in the Unified Development Ordinance started under the Jacobs administration? And just for background, this is Advanced Knox was sort of, this is our vision, and the UDO, as it is sort of the nuts and bolts, the details of how to carry that vision out. Are you a supporter of that?
I am, yeah. There's definitely things that, I think could be improved about, such as in the UDO, things like the future land use planning map. I think that there's, or zoning map, I'm sorry, the way that some of the restrictions in the aggregate may come out to restricting, density in the areas where we need it so that we can prevent that sprawl. I think that could be better, but overall, when it comes to Advanced Knox or the UDO, I think that throwing away, years of work and millions of dollars to just start over and continue to have 20th century regulations in place is not a good environment for business, for sure. I mean, I think it's a really chaotic situation for investment, and I would not want to see that happen. So,
for the record, your opponent did vote against the Advanced Knox plan, so just so our viewers who missed that conversation, she readily admitted it.
Following up on some of the questions that we got from viewers for both you and your opponent, let's imagine it's September 1. You are now the mayor of Knox County. What is the first big significant topic or project that you're going to be tackling?
There's things like that day one audit of pension modifications for the sheriff's deputies to kind of start off. I think really just getting things in the works, because you've got a lot of time before you even get to your budget as the next county mayor. So
you've got a little momentum going your way already.
Right. So it's I would spend that time making sure that we're setting up as many processes of accountability and transparency as possible to kind of expand that trust. And I would also be, making sure, because there's certain things about the way that there hasn't been enough of an assessment in that period, I think, in previous administrations of day-to-day operations and making sure that things are optimal. I think that would be a really good way to go about it, is to just start assessing that stuff much more thoroughly. And I'm not talking about cutting anybody or anything like that, but just making sure that we're doing things as well as we can.
Are there any particular offices or functions you're thinking about?
Yeah, I just think, in general, when it comes to, Parks and Rec, things like that, just making sure that, things are efficient, and that I'm not even necessarily saying that there are major problems, but I think that getting things to work together better as a whole would be a good way to get launched into that next budget.
You mentioned transparency. That is actually something that's on the minds of a lot of our viewers, and we hear about that a lot. So what I mean by that is, and what I'd like to ask you is, how are you going to show us clearly what you are up to, and how are we going to be able to hold you accountable?
I think it starts with being present. You know, that's a big value of mine, and I try to demonstrate that on a daily basis. And I think if you talk to the people that I work with or folks in the community that know me, they'll tell you that I have a record of doing that. And I think I would want to continue that as county mayor. I'd want to be continuing to show up in the community, being present so that people can ask me questions. And I would make sure to have open lines of communication, but also having more bodies within the county government that have representatives from the community on them so that they can, you know, serve in an advisory role, but also communicate things back to the community.
I mentioned that your opponent admitted she voted against the Advanced Knox plan. I should have used a different word. She pointed it out and said, I didn't vote for this plan, and here's why. So if you want to see that, you can listen to what Betsy Henderson says about that. But I also asked her a little bit about housing costs, because one viewer said, what can you do to bring the cost of housing down in Knox County?
I mean, it's a very simple problem of supply and demand. It's not a situation where you're trying to artificially regulate the cost of an apartment. It's making sure that we have more houses for people to live in. And I think that includes having more varieties of housing, having more price points, having more workforce housing, just attainable. You know, it's really important. I was a homeowner before I moved to Knox County, and now I'm a renter, so I'm really acquainted with how much of a problem the skyrocketing rent is. And I really want to see people able to get ahead.
And that's almost half our county, or half the city is in the rent class.
Right, yeah. It's a lot of people, and a lot of people that are continuing to get pushed out into neighboring counties, even though they continue to work here, which just continues to dwindle our existing tax base. So it just adds to the problems with revenue that we already have.
One last question, John.
Related to what John asked about housing, there's a whole issue of housing for the homeless. They have no place to go. It's not just a city problem. It is an issue that people in Knox County see as they get off the interstate, as they're out on a trail. How do you take part in addressing that?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right that it's not just a city problem. I think that the coordination that's currently happening between city and county government with the Office of Housing Stability is a really good thing, and I would want to continue that, and I would want to expand that. I'd want to work more with our nonprofits that are already engaged in the work. And I think, you know, you mentioned housing for homeless people. I think that the model of permanent supportive housing is a good model. It's effective, and it's a good way to, you know, address certain other issues like mental health, addiction, violence in the community. Making sure that people have a roof over their heads is the place to start. So I think that giving more resources to the folks that are doing the work and working more closely with the city on that would be a good thing.
Beau Hawk, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for devoting it to us, and also for running for office. It takes a lot of courage to do it, so thank you for getting in the ring, as they say.
I appreciate that. It was great talking to y'all.
Absolutely. You can watch, again, our interview with his opponent right now at WBIR.com. We appreciate you watching our special edition of Inside Tennessee. For John North and the rest of our team, have a great rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you next week right here on Inside Tennessee.